US tech firm Palantir is slowly gaining ground in the National Health Service. Last month, the British Medical Journal reported that a coalition of NHS organisations was urging hospitals across England to boycott the Palantir Federated Data Platform. That was after NHS England issued a directive that all should now adopt the controversial software. Last week, The Guardian reported an alarm within the NHS that Palantir engineers had been given NHS email accounts and with them access to a directory of 1.5 million NH staff. That is, it goes without saying, incredibly valuable and also privileged data. And on Tuesday, the Financial Times reported that NHS officials have warned staff over their criticisms of the rollout of the Palantir platform in the service, with some reporting having their jobs threatened as a result of their statements. The growing boycott of the Palantir platform within the NHS, where its adoption is currently voluntary, at least technically, is fueled by a number of concerns. There's the use of Palantir's artificial intelligence system by the Israeli military, with newer and bigger contracts signed in the midst of the Gaza genocide, with CEO Alex Karp bragging to Bloomberg in early 2024 that the company's products were in greater demand in Israel than ever since October 7th. Earlier this year, it was also reported that medical records are included in the datasets used by Palantir Technologies to help US ICE agents target people for deportation or an imprisonment. And maybe it's just me, but I'm really not sure that companies whose business model involves killing and capturing people should be in our health service at all, let alone have access to NHS data. But it isn't just me. Both the Green Party and the Lib Dems have said Palantir shouldn't be anywhere near our health service, and some Labour and Tory MPs have also objected. Not the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, of course. He's still for it. Earlier this week, Palantir UK boss Louis Mosley appeared on Politics Live to defend the company. Also there was academic and economist Faiza Shaheen, who put this point to Mosley.
Do you have objections to Palantir having a contract, what in particular with the NHS?
Yeah, with the NHS, but you spoke there about it's not political. Like and Palantir has such a key role in helping Israel kill children in Palestine and Lebanon. That has to be aligned, surely. And what does a company that is so involved in how to kill children with Israel and how to deport children from the US have an interest in the NHS and in our data? And I think that's the concern here, is the lack of trust. Now, you can read out that list. Absolutely, you speak to doctors, they say that it's fragmented and the information isn't all in one place, and the rest of it as patients as well. But there's lots of other companies that could do that who don't have this deeply immoral approach in the way that they do their business. And I think we are absolutely right, and Zach Palensky is absolutely right to say that we want your company out of the NHS.
Okay, let Louis answer that. She's saying that you are immoral, your company.
Well, I think I can address those concerns. The first and most important is those in Israel, like you mentioned, those systems are called Lavender and Gospel. We have nothing to do with them. I'm proud of the work we do in Israel, but we're not involved in the targeting that you mentioned. Secondly, on the data trust issue, we have no interest in patient data in the UK. It's not our business model. It's not the legal basis on which we operate. In the same way that Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word or email is used in the NHS, and again, that is NHS data. Microsoft doesn't have access to it, nor do we to NHS data. So I can really reassure you and viewers that that's the case.
Now, Palantir has long asserted that their software isn't used in the Lavender and Gospel targeting systems in Gaza, used by Israel in Gaza. But Alex Karp has been pretty clear that his software is used for targeting in Gaza, even if not through those systems.
The obvious fact is, if you care about not being surveilled illegally, if you care about the treatment of people who come into the country illegally but deserve adequate treatment, if you care about lives in Gaza, in Ukraine, and all over the world where Palantir is used, you're going to want the best software in the world, because it's the only way you can reduce and more precisely target the people and justifiably. And actually, the only way where you can say this person did this and they deserve to go.
So an admission there, like just a blank admission that the software is used to target people in Gaza, and that's a good thing because it's more accurate. I don't know, humans don't have to make judgments, so they can just hand it over to an algorithmically driven machine to do it. Makes killing easier, all those kinds of dystopian things. This was Faiza Shaheen's response to Mosley.
But why should we trust you? Because as we've seen, say, with the police in New York, when they tried to say we want we want Palantir to come out, it was really hard to kick you out of their data. That reliance grows, and you do these free contracts or like, oh, try this. And then you're like, oh, now we're going to charge 300 million for it. I mean, it's the way in which your company has behaved. We're right to question how you may be and what you might do with our data and how difficult it will to get you out of our systems.
We would lose our business in this country if we ever did any of those things. We are legally prevented from doing so. So there is absolutely no way in which we are ever going to do any of the things that you are suggesting with patient data. We can't. And I would also say that really what we should be judged on is whether we're delivering for patients in this country. And I would suggest that it will be very difficult to tell patients that their operations have to be delayed in this country because you have a political problem with the supplier and the way in which that software is being used in other countries around the world.
Well, I mean, I think that there's other companies that can do that kind of work when we're not arguing that we don't need some systems. But ultimately, when you hire a private company to do something, our taxpayers' money goes to your company. And the other involvement that you have around the world does have an impact, right? It does mean it is connected. So when we pay you, it allows you to do all of these other things as well. And so the moral implications, right, the NHS is at the heart of our morals, actually. It's at the heart of who we are in this country. So it's absolutely right that the moral question there should be at the forefront. And honestly, I'm so disappointed with the Labour Party.
I think, Aaron, one of the issues that I have with AI, which makes me most sort of anxious about it, is that obviously it's a technology owned by a small number of firms in different forms, which has as its model or as its kind of philosophy getting into everything, right? You want to get into everything, which means that there's no use for it, which isn't also funding its use in something that you're going to have a political objection to, probably, right? So yes, maybe it will be great in the NHS, maybe it would make things more efficient, but the use of it there is supporting its military activities. And indeed, it's like sort of, in some sense, public service washing its private military activities, for example. So when he says there, we shouldn't, the NHS will suffer because you're refusing to use a technology that you have a political problem with because of its activities in other parts of the world or in other sectors. He sort of doesn't seem to understand that. Well, I don't want to put this point, that there's a kind of rejection of the idea that people should think holistically about AI. They should just be thinking about, it's a very capitalistic idea, how it serves their interests in that moment, in that slice of time, in that slice of industry. I mean, are people ever going to think about it in that way?
Well, I think that's an important question. What you said a moment ago about how AI wants to creep everywhere is absolutely true. At the moment, Palantir, in terms of its NHS operations, is doing things like bed scheduling, staff rotas, diagnostic pathways, which actually AI probably can do quite good things there, probably can save money and save time, and you can allocate resources elsewhere. Right. I'm not suggesting Palantir should do that, but I think those are the kinds of services where you could see analytics-driven AI being very, very useful. Of course, that's just the leading edge. Eventually, it would do more and more, I think, to the point that where lots of tasks in the future will be automated, even in the application of healthcare, they would be there as well. They don't want the NHS to exist. And that's not just a point about the NHS, it's right across the world of work. I don't know if you've seen this recently, but there was a factory in India where men were stitching textiles. It was men for some reason, usually it's women. And they were stitching textiles together, and they had cameras on their heads, seeing their hand movements so that these can be recorded and so that machines could be trained about the fine motor coordination needed to create this product. Extraordinary. So they're not just being exploited in that work where they're being paid probably very little for what they're doing, but also they're helping to simultaneously train the machine that will replace them and make them redundant. That's what's different about AI.
And they're not being paid to do that training, right?
No.
Additionally, right?
Quite. So they're being exploited on two counts. So that's one thing. This doesn't stop. This doesn't stop. This just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And by the way, when you watch that clip of Mosley, yes, that family, Mosley, although of course never judge the son or grandson by the sins of the grandfather in this instance, he was trained by the media, for the media rather, within an inch of his life. It was like I was watching Clavicular. He was so calm. It's like he was on beta blockers.
I was going to say beta blockers, yeah.
He was just there saying, well, why would you deprive patients of this incredible service? And And again, by the way, we heard all of this in the late 1990s with NHS software updates that, new IT systems that Tony Blair was very enthusiastic about and ended up being a waste of about £10 billion. So that's a dangerous argument. Actually, it's not even an argument because, you can't say that this thing in the future won't happen, therefore they're missing out. Well, they're not missing out because it hasn't happened yet. And then finally, and this is really a centre-right argument, Stephen, even if you think that AI should be in the NHS, even if you think there's room for private sector investment to be pushing AI in the NHS, which I think most Tories would say, shouldn't it be a British company?
Yeah.
Why is it an American company? And he compares it to Microsoft and Google and Meta. Are you spotting a pattern there? They're all American firms. And the money generally goes back to America. It's America that's benefiting from this work, these contracts. And I think there's a bigger argument to be made about dependence on US infrastructure, whether it's military, whether it's civilian technology like this, whether it's just the consumer technology we all rely on, from Netflix to, Apple Pay. I think that the centre-right should be part of that conversation because I thought they wanted what's best for this country. And what is not best for this country is billions every week going across the Atlantic to US big tech. So whichever way you look at this, moderate, radical, left, right, I don't see why you would want more Palantir in the NHS.
It's a security issue as well, right?
Yeah.
We happen to have a certain kind of relationship with the US at the moment.
Yeah.
If that alters, but their proprietary technology of a private company in California or wherever they are is embedded into our health service, for example, or into our banking systems or into our government, that is just a security risk. I mean, we wouldn't do it with China, right? We're doing it with the US because we're currently in a position of allyship with them. But, that may change over time.
Yeah. I mean, we were told that we shouldn't have Huawei building 5G systems in this
Right.
country because we would become dependent on Beijing. It's okay to become dependent, which, by the way, we wouldn't. Nokia and Ericsson are European providers of the same technology. They do the same thing, not as cheaply and effectively, but they still do it. This is really, really dangerous. And I think the levels of technological dependence on the United States is something we don't talk about nearly enough. Let's say Palantir had an expanded role in the NHS and other civilian areas too, and Alex Karp does something awful. Palantir is found to have behaved in a criminal way, as Meta was in the past, for instance. And then they're subsequently punished. There's a political conversation in this country, well, we don't actually want this kind of company involved in literally life or death services that we all depend on. Well, sorry, we can't do that actually because, Palantir, in terms of a provider of service, the NHS is too big to fail. We can't get rid of them. Let's be serious. Let's be serious. We shouldn't have that kind of player inside the healthcare market in this country, which is a state system, but there is a market, sadly, because we use private contracts for loads of things. But equally, I don't think the NHS should be relying on any firms that are not resident in the UK. Now, I know Palantir will have a UK wing, but I think there's real problems there. And I'll just finish with one thing quickly. MI5 and MI6 in this country, their data servers are Amazon. So this idea, and we talked about it with Iran, about Iran being a sovereign country. We're not a sovereign country. How can you be a sovereign country when MI6, when James Bond and Q, all their emails potentially and all their data is ultimately reliant on an American company? That is not sovereignty. That is not independence. Strangely enough, despite people like Nigel Farage talking about that till the cows come home, when it comes to American technology firms being able to hold us by the short and curlies, they don't seem to mind.